Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Debriefed. Today we will be talking about, first of all, I'm joined by a really good friend of mine. You guys know him already. This is Nelson Dellis. Nelson and I both did the retreat for the Gateway Experience at the Monroe Institute, and this is really our first time talking about it on camera and in real life. Like we saved this conversation.
We held back.
Before we get into this, guys, I would encourage you to check out the Patreon for extra content, including extra episodes of Debriefed, and not to mention all the full interviews, the uncut interviews from the last documentary series that we did and the previous ones before that. Also, it gives you access to the Discord, and we have a top secret sort of section at the Discord, which is a lot of fun. We get into fun things like movie night, Q&As, and basically just have a good time there investigating the newest sort of cases that we're looking into. So check it out. I'll leave the link to all that below. And don't forget to rate us on your favorite audio app, whether it's Spotify or iTunes or whatever that is. Do us a favor, leave us a rating there. It goes a long way. All right, without any further ado, welcome, Nelson.
What's up? How you doing?
What's up? I'm good, man.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I feel like we're different people now.
Yeah. That couldn't be more true.
Jesus.
Absolutely. It's been, I mean, there's been so many synchronicities and changes since I've gotten back, and I'm sure the same for you.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, when we're talking, I've only uploaded one episode of the sort of the Gateway program to my channel, but this will be coming out after the whole thing's done.
Okay.
So they'll be up to speed on everything. Let's start with before, because I read an interesting article. This was on LinkedIn, and it was the Monroe Institute, and they had an article based on if you look back, and I wanted to mention this, and I held back, but if you look back at the previous weeks leading up to this, how many things had to line up and how many things were preparing you for this experience?
Okay. Yeah.
And if you look back now, can you think of any?
Yeah. I mean, I think even the circumstances to which I found myself, like, even considering going. I mean, I know the first time I thought, oh, it would be cool to do this with you or whatever at all, was when we were with Joe, last Joe McMonagle last year. And he mentioned that we could do a course with him or at least to visit the Institute. I was like, yeah. I'll probably never really have a time to do that. Like, I don't know if it's on my radar.
I had the same feeling.
And even when you told me that you were going to do this creator week or that it was even a thing, I was actually accepted because I threw my hat in the ring. I was like, yeah, I got to do it. But I couldn't quite make it work.
Yeah.
And I was kind of bummed. I was like, I wanted to do that with Chris. It would have been kind of like the next step in what we're doing, but it didn't work out. But I told you this, that I felt like it was maybe better that I did it, or that I was supposed to do it on my own, that it was an experience I needed to like do on my own. And so how that kind of played out was kind of interesting before.
Because you'd made everything happen, but then like things prevented you from being there. Because initially, so the creator program that they set up was the first time they've ever let creators film the process, the Gateway program process, and that whole experience. It's never been documented from the inside.
That's wild.
And so Paul Citarella, who works there, he's been just a great person to talk with, because he's the one who really organized all of this and is trying to propel Monroe Institute into a new era where people are aware of this stuff. So it's really cool. And I reached out to Nelson. I was like, we got to do this together. Yeah. And we both said yes. We both agreed. And then you kind of backed out last minute because you had, personal family stuff. You have a new child.
Yeah, it boiled down to childcare. I mean, everything's so.
You had a newborn
difficult
to take care of, and it's not the time to take a retreat.
No. I mean, my wife's very understanding. So it's like, if we have the help, it's cool.
Yeah.
And I had lined up help, but it fell through.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of like, one of my little ones was sick, and it was really just like all hands needed to be on deck.
Wasn't there something with flights too?
Oh, yeah. Well, No, well, that was something else.
Okay.
But that I tried to organize after, and a flight got canceled, but not to do with the actual
Oh, I see.
thing. But yeah, even just like where I was at, I felt like
mentally, you mean?
mentally, and I don't think I could have gone that week. I was just so backed up with work and so many things on my mind. Like I was not ready for that. So with the extra 2-3 weeks that I had before I went, it was,
Get the glasses on here.
I don't know. It just was had a different vibe. It was like more the right time, and I think it worked out.
I think so
for a
too,
reason
man.
That way.
You know, when I went there, it was interesting because there was 13 of us. There was supposed to be 19 of us. So you obviously weren't the only one who backed out last second.
Okay.
There was really supposed to be 19 of us. And but we also felt that like that was the perfect amount of people for what we went through. And it just had to work out like that. And I feel like if you were there with me, I had such a profound like spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I'd hear myself saying this, but it was a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And if you were there with me, I don't know if it would have happened the same way, because you and I both share a similar skepticism towards this topic. And perhaps if we both, were in that experience together, we might have just, I don't know.
Isolated?
Yeah, we might have isolated.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we might have been afraid to show maybe a more vulnerable side of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though we're close friends, like it's still, we might have just not been as vulnerable for fear of something.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think it had to happen the way it did.
Yeah.
That being said, I had a few weeks leading up to it as well that like I get these signs. Only thinking back, and it happened. Like there's one thing, and a lot of people might not know this, but we're in the process of literally downsizing the company and like letting go a whole bunch of people here, and it's been, this all happened before, because I'm just feeling overwhelmed. I was at a breaking point in my career and in my personal mental state where I just took on too much, and I was wearing myself thin, and it wasn't fun anymore. And I was getting to this point where I've been before, where I burn out.
Yep. And
that was all leading up to this. And then I remember standing in line at the supermarket here, and this is where it really hit me when I look back on it. There was a lady in front of me. She was paying for her groceries, and there was like two ladies behind me who were waiting. And the lady who was paying, her card wouldn't work. And then she's trying another card, and it wouldn't work. And another one. And she's paying cash. And this whole ordeal lasted like 4 minutes, which is a long time standing in line holding, items.
Sure.
4 minutes is a long time. The ladies behind me, I felt their energy, and I heard them, kind of like annoyed. Roll their eyes. Annoyed, right? Yeah. And this lady in front of me was so stressed because she was feeling that energy from them, and she was trying to, and it wasn't her fault the card was going through. Yeah. Lady at the cash register, she was like, ugh, come on, And the thought occurred to me instantly, like, we're all just trying to get to the next thing. Got to hurry up and get to the next thing. And then I realized in that moment, holy shit, this is the thing. Yep. This is the thing. This is what I've been trying to get to. Holy fuck. And it just dawned on me. And I was there holding these items. And I remember being in this moment, listening to the stupid pop music that was playing on the radio and feeling like I could stay in this moment for hours. I was so happy to be in line at that moment and enjoying.
Inconvenienced by this lady.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It wasn't even about it. It was like I was in the present moment for the first time in a long time. And it really started shifting everything for me after that. And it's after that I sort of made the decision, with the company and that I've been drawing back from posting content on the main channel and just kind of taking care of my personal mental health. Yeah. And then the retreat. Yeah. Which we'll get into.
Yeah. No, there's been a lot of synchronicities happening to me in the last month and a half. I mean, I always, since getting into remote viewing and stuff like that, I've paid more attention, but I feel like they've ramped up like, whoa. Oh, yeah. In the last month and a half. I briefly told you, but the week before I was supposed to go was the opening to the Belmont races at the racetrack in my little town that I live.
Yes.
And I do this for fun sometimes. I'll just predict the winner of a race.
With remote viewing.
With remote viewing, yeah. Like a kind of a shorthand version of it, but I win 25% of the time. I get it right 25% of the time.
And how many? And what are the odds of you winning 25% of the time?
I think if you roughly calculate it, it's probably like 10%.
So you should be winning 10% of the time.
Yeah.
Through guess.
If you just guess randomly.
Because there's 10 horses.
More or less. Sometimes horses get scratched. Some have there's more horses in a race, whatever. But on average, I'd say there's about 10 horses.
And you're winning a quarter of the time, which is way above
more
average.
Actually. Yeah. And so that day was the Belmont. There's many races that day, but the Belmont is the big one with the biggest stakes and all that stuff and the
hottest horses.
Yeah. So I hadn't won that day, but that race, I actually had predicted it with my little horse group that we have going on.
You have a group of horses?
Well, people who make predictions on these random horse races. And we don't bet. We just kind of like gather data and see if it aligns. We're all doing the same kind of remote viewing thing.
That's awesome.
And I predicted Black, I think it was, which happened to be this horse named Doorknock.
Underdog.
Yeah, nobody was even talking about it, you know?
Because before... You predict a lot of oftentimes because you don't know who the colors are associated to prior.
Exactly.
Because then you'll be front loaded.
Yeah, I know nothing about horses. I don't even know anything about horse racing, really.
Right. So they all have colors, and those colors aren't the same colors every race.
No.
They're switched on horses, so there's no way that you can say that like green is always the good horse. Like,
right, yeah.
So people who don't understand this, it's completely random. And to not get front loaded, you know the colors of what's going to be in the race, but you don't know which horses those are associated to.
Right.
But sometimes, and oftentimes, you end up choosing the color that's the favorite.
Yep. Yeah. Most of the time. Well, because
and then you win, and it's not so much, but it's fine. But you still predicted that, which is really cool. But now,
so then it's exciting when you see a color that is an underdog because you're like, if this is right, I win a lot of money.
How much do you put down?
We're talking a lot of money. I put like $10 usually, because I'm trying to be responsible.
Big spender.
Yeah. And it's the fun of the Belmont. You know, put a little cash. It's always fun. But anyway, so I was going to make my bet, and do it in cash there because it's very old timey, and I walk across. And there were 50,000 people that day.
Holy cow.
It was a very busy day.
Holy horse.
Holy horse. And I walk across a dime. Not drugs, but a coin. Dime. And that's my thing in my life. I always find dimes. Like in the most, and by themselves, not like a chunk of change, just a single dime along my path on a thing for me to see, and I pick it up. And usually when I pick it up, most of the time, and I put it like in my little jar or whatever at home, something good happens, like financially,
like an omen.
Like I get a gig or some opportunity comes up, and this it's wild because I already had this sense that I had guessed the right horse in the day before. I told you it was Black.
Yes,
and I was like, I know it's gonna win.
But the thing that differentiates this, and this is something that I felt in my remote viewing sessions as well, is it isn't a guess.
Right.
It is a knowing. And it's not a belief. It's not a fake it till you make it, a confidence thing. It is a knowing.
Yeah.
Like when you just know, you're like, oh, I know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that it isn't just some guess. But when you know, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I saw that coin and I was like, I'm on my way to make this bet for this thing that I know. This is wild. Nobody's picked this up. Like it's clearly in the path. Anyways, I go and make my bet and I'm like, $10. Like, I know the horse. I know the winner. Like, let me put more. I end up putting 50, and I even felt bad for a second, but I remember thinking, like, why do you feel bad when you know you've won the money? And I know it's very irresponsible to think like that, and that's why I don't really bet a lot.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting feeling to be so certain about something. And sure enough, the horse won. And it was a crazy race because he was a super underdog, and he was first out of the gates. And usually the first horse, you're like, oh,
loses gas.
He's never going to. That's like a terrible sign in horse racing. But he stuck it out. It was wild. And I almost heard a pin drop in all those 50,000 people watching because
they couldn't believe it.
Well, and because nobody fucking bet on that horse. So they were all like,
how many people do you think actually bet on that horse?
I don't know.
There's got to be a handful.
I'm sure. Yeah. The owners at least, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I won a good chunk, and then
wait. So it was the odds were, you told me 17-1.
I think it was even more. I think it went up. I think it might have been like 25 to 1 or something.
25-1. You bet how much? $50?
Yeah.
So you made like over $1,000.
Yeah.
Over $1,000 with a $50 bet is wild.
Yeah. I was like, damn, I should put like my life savings.
Obviously, you should have. But obviously that would have been irresponsible.
Yeah.
But you still had the knowing that 10 wasn't enough. There was an omen with a dime.
Yeah.
And there was like some instinctive, intuitive knowing that, yeah, I have to put more because I know the answer to this.
Yeah.
And you did that, and you followed through on that, and you believed yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying go out there to Hollywood or go out there to Vegas and start betting your life savings, but this is something that has come up for me a lot lately. If you get that feeling and that knowing, you must pursue it.
Yep.
Because the universe kind of will reward you.
Yeah. And it's funny because that feeling was kind of a new feel. I've kind of had some of that for when I do remote viewing, but this felt stronger. And it's funny because in the retreat, that, like, I'm sure as you're alluding to now, is it like that knowing feeling was a common theme in a lot of the experiences I was having. So that was maybe like a little teaser, before that happened. So very crazy.
So, I mean, very crazy indeed. And just another thing that overlaps and that elevates this whole experience into reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay. Monroe Institute. So I had my experience, and then 2 weeks later, you had yours.
Yep.
So, we're roughly in the same time frame. Now, I had the upper camp.
Yes.
You had the lower camp.
The mountain retreat.
Yeah, I had the mountain retreat. You had the lower one.
Yeah.
So that's something I want to get into too, because my experience was a bit different than yours then.
Yeah.
In terms of what that felt like and looked like. We had this like cabin that we'd go to, and like you saw the video, it was a little more quaint. We went down to the lower camp, but that it looked pretty cool. Like,
yeah, it's what I know. We did go up to yours and take a look around, and I had seen some of your pictures and stuff. So I was like, oh, that looks cool. But I remember thinking like, I kind of like mine better.
Same. We had a pool.
I would have loved it. We kept asking to use it, and they were like, no, you can't use it. I was like, what are you talking about?
We swam in it every day.
It's crazy.
Every single day we jumped in the pool. It was very hot. You had a lake, though, not too far away.
That's true. And a couple of people went in the lake. I'm not a lake swimming person, but we did have that. But it was, I think because you have an amazing experience there and the people there, like, you make it your own, Yeah. So I understand why. I'm sure if I had been set up there, I would have loved it more than the other. But it was cool. It felt a bit more spacious. Like we had the bigger open
field with the crystal in the middle of the field. So cool.
Yeah. It was nice like that. And you had the vistas of the mountain.
Yeah.
I don't know how much visibility you had.
Yeah, not much because like the trees. Yeah.
And it was when I got there, I was kind of like, oh dear, this is a bit stuffy and old time. And I don't know if I can stay here a week. And then I was put in a room with 2 other dudes. There was 3 of us in a room. I was like, where have they put me? Like, they put me in a closet, but it ended up being like so cozy and perfect. Yeah.
How restful were those nights in the check units?
I was so relaxed. One of the things that I said to myself was like, if I don't get anything out of this, I'm going to be the most relaxed version of myself.
That's exactly what I said to myself on camera.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I said the exact same. I was like, if nothing else,
yeah,
I need this.
Yeah.
I need to relax.
I don't have to cook for my kids. I don't have to clean up after my kids. I don't have to hear my kids. I mean, I miss them, but it's just me and my thoughts. And I can sleep through all these exercises if I want, and that's...
And worrying will do you no good in that situation, Also, the food was great.
Right, yeah.
3 meals a day, cooked fresh every day.
Delicious.
Yeah.
And I'm picky, and they had little options here and the salad bar and snacks whenever you wanted them. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had, so we have this place called the Fox's Den, or Fox Den or whatever. Yeah. Okay. And that's kind of where we got together before, and maybe because, so the way it played out, like we talked about it in the video, but you get up early on, you get the music, you get the tuning frequency, and then we have morning yoga or whatever, breakfast, and then you start your introduction to whatever it is you were learning.
Yep.
And then probably do about 3 sessions before lunch with a debrief in between those.
Yep. Have
lunch, and then we'd have a break from 1 to 4, which was really nice. Yep. And especially, for creators on our end, gave us time to really film stuff and, interview people. And then at 4, we'd have another session, 1 or 2 meditations again with debriefs. Then we'd have dinner, And then after dinner, we'd have like an event.
Yeah.
So either someone would come to talk or we'd watch a movie.
Yeah.
And that would go on till about 9, 10 o'clock. And then a lot of people would taper off. But us, my group, every single night in the Fox's Den, I would host about 5 people. And some of them stayed and some of them interchanged. And I would perform magic till about 2 a.m.
Holy shit! Wow.
every night. So there would be, but it wasn't just me performing magic. It was also like we did this thing called the Cube in the Desert experiment.
Yeah.
You know this?
Another one, yeah.
So I did this to everybody eventually, like because people would sort of chatter about it during the day. It's like, oh, did you get to see the magic show last night? Oh, did you get you got to try this Cube in the Desert thing. And so people would come in the evening, and it was really such an awesome fucking thing to do with people, to connect with them on a personal, deeper level. Yeah. So we'd end up doing that in the Fox Den, and there were snacks and everything, and but the thing is, I've never felt more rested in my life, even sleeping 4 hours a night.
Yeah.
Because we were meditating for 6 hours a day,
Right.
So I'd click out every now and then, but
Yeah. And I don't meditate. I've never meditated. I've tried, and I'm just like, I got better things to do. I always say when I memorize, that's my meditation, because it's like my focus on this one thing, and sure. But to be like with yourself like that, I don't do that.
Yeah, man.
So that was new to me. And the interesting thing to me is all the meditation I've ever been told how to do is like focus on your breath. Like try not to think about anything. And when you stray, go back to the breath, right? And sit this way and that way and breathe, whatever. But there was no instruction about that. And it really wasn't about that. It felt like I like to do this as I think about my memories and just kind of like live in them and visualize the things. And it was like a lot of that, just different exercises related to visualization. So it was interesting to me to hear about meditating, but you were like free to actually think,
right,
freely. Not be so.
They didn't discourage you. Like it wasn't so procedural because meditation sounds boring to me. Like when I heard about it the first time, I was like, this. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I guess I'll do it for 10 minutes. And I got other shit to do. But you're right. There was, they would encourage a thought. Like if a thought comes in and you kind of can't let it go, well, maybe you're supposed to sit with it. Yeah. And maybe you're supposed to figure out why you're getting this thought and then move on. And there was this sort of like free flowing energy to these meditations that felt more natural and less forced. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember more so at the beginning, every little thought that I'd have, I'd be like, what does this mean? Why is it being shown to me? I got to remember this. And then I'd never remember it because I'd be like half asleep or in between sleep. Yeah. And then people would say, like, well, if you're supposed to remember it, it will come back, And I was like, okay, that's kind of freeing. Less pressure to like remember everything. If it was important enough as a message, then it will stick. Yeah.
And being left-brained majority of the time, I find myself, I find I have a healthy balance, but for a lot of this stuff, I'm usually left-brained. Yeah. I'm usually very analytical. Yeah. And sort of like, how can I figure this out? What is what does this mean? What is this? Am I supposed to be feeling this right now? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? Is this normal? Yeah. And as the week progressed for me, I slowly let go. And a lot of that happened in the debriefs. Where I would hear people and their experiences, and then in comparison to mine, and I was just kind of like, oh, I guess you're just supposed to like go with it and let go. And that was the real big lesson that I learned for the meditations to work, is the notion of letting go, and for out of body to work as well. Yeah. Is you have to just completely release. Yeah. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Yeah.
Like I felt like it started all up here, and slowly it went to here. Mm-hmm. Like it was less about my mind and more my heart. And as cheesy as that sounds. Yeah. But there's something to it, where it was more feeling and an immersive opening than like an analytical like problem to solve.
Yeah, right.
Every time.
The first experience that I had with this that I guess I'll run through my first out of body because I really didn't
Yeah.
talk about it in the video much. I dramatized it for the video and made a sort of a skit out of it. But that actually happened to me.
So I had a question about that because
Yeah.
you said before you tell it again, but that was in October.
This was October last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because remember I came here
Yes.
and Wes was here. We had dinner. You told me about an OBE, and I swear that it was like something you were recalling from a long time ago.
Oh no, it had just happened.
Oh shoot. Okay.
Yeah, it had just happened. And looking back at the timeline was really interesting because it was just when we got back from seeing Joe.
Yes.
When you think about it.
Yeah.
Right. So it was
So
amidst
weird.
all
Okay.
of this OBE talk. I had one. I didn't even realize it at the time.
And didn't you have two though?
I had 2 back to back. Yeah.
Oh, they were back to back.
Back to back 2 nights in a row.
Wow. Okay.
So
got it.
the way this happened is I had stopped smoking weed for like a week because at this point I had quit vaping. I was vaping all the time, and I was like, ugh, I got to get rid of this stuff. So to quit vaping, I also stopped smoking weed because any sort of inhalation vice like would just trigger, and I would want to vape again. So I just quit everything. And about a week later, I didn't know this, but there's something called REM rebound. And when REM rebound happens, it's basically this floodgate of REM sleep that you naturally seek, that your mind naturally needs, and it builds up. So it stores itself. And then when you have this REM rebound of this release, after, all these inhibitors are gone, it comes pouring out. Sure. I didn't know this. But at the same time, I was having a hard time sleeping because I wasn't doing my nightly, weed smoking routine where I'd fall asleep. And so I was like, maybe I'll take a melatonin. So I took a little melatonin. And in Canada, and this is something I found out in the comments, it's not legal everywhere. I guess you have to have it prescribed in some places. Here it's over the counter. So I popped a melatonin. Melatonin is also known to increase, it helps something get secreted from the pineal gland, and it helps increase REM sleep, basically.
Okay.
Again, so I'm just like creating the perfect storm right now. I go to sleep. In my sleep, I have... Now, it's to be noted, as a child, I've always had vivid dreams, and a lot of times they'd turn lucid since I was a kid. I'd have lucid dreams. I'd be able to control my dreams.
Okay.
And a lot of times, this is weird to say, but a lot of times the way that those dreams would be controlled is through like a sex dream. I would get aroused in my dream, and then I would say, "Oh, this is a dream. I can just have sex here," and it would turn lucid.
It's like
it would,
any 13-year-old's like
exactly. But
mind.
it still happens to me as an adult, right? But not so much when I was smoking weed. And so now I'm having all these strange dreams throughout this week. After about day 3, day 4, I'm starting to have vivid dreams, and they're starting to turn lucid. Now, at the last day, like day 7 or day 8, I'm having this nightmare. I do not recall the nightmare, but it wasn't like a catastrophe, and it wasn't a monster or anything like that. It was more like a figure that I was afraid of, and I couldn't. It was just like gave me a real fright. And I was like, no, I don't want to be here, don't want to be here. And I forced my eyes to open. Like I could feel me forcing my eyes to open. And this is a trick when I was a kid to get out of dreams. I was like, ugh, and open them up. Now I'm in my bed. I'm in my bed. The room is gray and fuzzy.
Yeah.
I'm vibrating. Like there's a hum. There's like a like, and I feel my whole body humming like a tuning fork. Uh-huh. And I hear this loud whoosh right at the beginning. And everything's like grainy, like high, like ISO on a camera, like when you ramp up the ISO. And I'm in my bed, and I have this feeling, much like I do in lucid dreams, where I can just fly. And I haven't done that since a long time. I haven't flown in a very long time in my dreams. I used to fly all the time. But I'm in my bed, right? So I'm like, I have the same feeling. So I just start lifting off. And I'm lifting. I'm maybe 3 feet out of my bed, when it dawns on me that I'm flying in my fucking room. And the terror that I felt, you have to understand. People are like, why were you afraid? Imagine you started flying right now, not when you're asleep, right now.
So the important thing is that it's a difference between, you're not dreaming.
I woke up from a nightmare to be in my bed. Now, I know that there's the whole Inception thing where you wake up into a dream. This did not feel like that. Mm-hmm. It did not feel like that to this day. Anyways, I get scared. I'm like, no. And I slam back into my body. I then come to, I'm in my room. It's darker now. I can't see anything. Very strange. I could see a second ago. I can't see anything now.
Crazy.
I get up, my heart's beating, pounding. I drink some water. I was very shaken. I was like, what a wild dream. But I'm so affected by it because I'm like, normally when you come out of a dream, you're like, oh, that was just a dream. This didn't feel like that. I was like, God, that's so strange. So the next day, I'm like, let me try this again. See if this goes anywhere. Because I talked to some people about it, and I was like, it's really fucking bizarre happened to me. They're like, I guess it's a dream. I was like, yeah, okay. Popped another melatonin. Went to bed. Woke up. Same thing. Familiar, gray buzzing, everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, here we go again. I'm in my bed. This time I lift out. And I'm going up. I'm about 4 feet above my bed.
Easier to get there?
Same.
Okay.
It wasn't hard to lift out. I've never had a hard time, flying in dreams.
Okay.
So I lift out. I'm above the bed. This time I turn around.
Like rotated?
Yeah, exactly. Like turn my gaze.
Okay.
And I see me.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, don't be scared. Don't be scared this time. We're in it. We're doing it. And I see me, and oh my God. The fear, the sheer terror that grips you is paralyzing. Imagine I'm talking to you right now, and imagine I go, hey, Nelson, look at that. And you look, and it's just you sitting there.
Yeah.
That's how scared I was.
Right.
It was real. This time, I'm floating back to my body. I'm like swimming back to my body. And I remember feeling myself interfacing with my body. Like I felt me coming into
meshing.
myself. Yeah. Like it was like I felt this. Like if you do this with your fingers, that's kind of what it felt like.
Okay.
And I go in, but this time, my body's here, let's say. I go here, and then I go lower. And now I'm like 4 inches past. I'm like, no. And it frightened me even more. And I get back in my body, wake up, sort of like so scared. Yeah. Because now I'm like, I didn't know you can go down. I didn't know down was an option.
Yeah, what's there?
I knew up was an option. But what's down? I don't want to go down. How far can you go? Yeah. Terrifying. I start Googling this stuff. And turns out the symptoms that I had are really shared by a lot of people. From the sounds, the vibrations, everything. I didn't know anything about out-of-body experience. Yeah. I didn't know that's what I had.
Yeah.
I couldn't make sense of it until I started really accepting the fact that, this is what Joe McMoneagle was talking about. Yeah. This is what Ed Dames was talking about. And then sort of everything synchronized and fell into place to where, we got to go experience that over there. I want to ask you, sorry for rambling, was there a point in your retreat where anyone had a real out-of-body experience?
I think it might have been me. It sounded like there were more going on at yours in terms of that, or maybe people who have had experiences prior.
Right.
But nobody had an experience prior.
Really?
From what I understood.
Wow. Everybody, except save 2 or 3 people, had multiple experiences prior.
But maybe the curators that creators that they curated, they're more of that realm.
Yeah.
Our group was average people. That all sorts of backgrounds, mostly people who were just curious. About not necessarily OBEs. Actually, I don't think anybody was there to say, "Hey, I want an OBE." I think that might have been more me than anybody.
Really.
At least to start, and curiosity of just beyond the self, the physical self. But nobody really talked about it. They had very profound experiences. And I said this as a trainer. I was like, I came here more with this intention of having OBEs, and that's what I thought this was all about. But it was like a very tiny part of it in the end.
Because it was the Gateway program.
Yeah.
And the first step of Gateway is Focus 10.
Yeah.
And Focus 10 is readily used for out-of-body.
Yeah.
It is the mind awake, body asleep. That is the out-of-body state.
Yep.
From there, it's expanded awareness, no time, the intergalactic highway, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, that's interesting.
But I had a few experiences. It wasn't what I expected fully, but I did have some. I would categorize them as OBEs for sure. Yeah.
So, because I know that there is, Arky told me, one of the trainers there, that there, because I was always like, oh, out of body is the way to go. Out of body is what I want. And he's like, out of body is fine. But the amount of things that you can do with just projecting your consciousness or a part of your consciousness. And he's like, that's not necessarily out of body, but it's literally a part of your consciousness is going out there.
Okay.
But you're not floating above
Yeah.
your body.
That piece is
So you're projecting a piece of your consciousness. And so I'm wondering if that's something more, because I don't feel like you had like that. You didn't pop out.
No.
Right.
Well, so the big thing that happened to me, I didn't pop out, like you said. I resonate more with what you just said, where it sounded like my consciousness was there. And I also questioned whether it was like, did I remote view this?
Yes.
But
or is it all in the same?
Yeah, or is it all the same? But the thing with remote viewing is usually, and there's theories about this, but who knows what's real or not. But after you do a session, you see your work after. Like the feedback is there. And that's important because a lot of people say that remote viewing is precognition.
Yeah.
And so all you're really seeing is yourself seeing the results afterwards.
Right. It's retrocausality or whatever.
Yeah. So if you don't look at the feedback, then you don't expect to have a good session. So it's a big part of the process. Kind of a weird loop there. So when I had this thing happen to me, I didn't get the feedback. I didn't have the body pop out. So what was it? Let me explain the story, because it was the first thing that really like blew my mind there. And I don't remember. I think it was Focus 10 still, but we had a free flow session where they're basically telling us to try it, have maybe a purpose, and state that to yourself, and then see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. And so I think some people maybe had more meaningful purposes, but I was like, I'm going to guess a number. And so I asked one of the other people at random, hey, can you write down a 4-digit number, put it on your desk? They're in a different room. And I'm going to see if I can come out of my body and see it. And then we'll confirm it, not really expecting to. But
take us through what happened.
Yeah.
Take us through the feeling and everything. I want to know everything.
Yeah. So let's see. So I don't know this person. I don't know what they're going to guess. I don't know anything about them. This is literally day 1 after the orientation when we all landed.
The free flow Focus 10 on day 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the afternoon.
Yeah, third session.
Yeah, something like that. And so I go to my little cubby, my check unit. We're going through these guided steps with Bob in our ears and the soundscapes. And I'm trying so hard like to pop out as if it's like,
like a physical
like
activity.
I'm trying to take a shit or something. You know what I mean? Like it's like, come on,
spiritual crap.
And I've heard things like pull the rope or
climb out or roll out.
Climb out. Yeah, the rollout we did later. I didn't know about that one as a technique, but nothing's happening. And then I just relax and I'm just like, you know what? I see what I see, And I started to get these splotches. And again, this is on the border of being kind of asleep/awake. So I'm sure I clicked out, they call it, when you kind of sleep for a second and you're back. But I started to get these splotches. And the way I described it to the people there is it felt like I was in a dark room, black, and I had a lantern, like candlelit lantern, and in a dark cave, right? And I could light certain things up, and it was kind of, lit like this a little bit, and then it would close off, and it was black again. And the first splotch of things I could see was kind of like a wall, a textured wall. And I remember kind of running my hand across it, and then it disappeared. Okay. Then it showed kind of the floor, and the check units have like a little opening, like a wooden frame around the opening that you get into your bed. And so I saw the bottom corner of that. If I was like looking at the floor, and there was a bunch of like bags/clothes there, and I was like, okay, this looks like a side of a bed kind of thing, and then it closed off. And then the next was an angular, like, imagine this is the desk. It was a little smaller, but I had an angle of it like this. So kind of a shallow angle, not above. And there were papers, not as many as this, but a few papers on there, and one/card, small paper with numbers on it. And I read clearly 173, and then I couldn't quite make out the last digit. It was a bit fuzzy, maybe because of the angle. I don't know. And I was like, that is so clear to me. That is a number. And then I realized to myself, like, this is the person's room. This is the table. I don't know why there's other stuff on the table. That felt weird to me. Like, if this person was going to do this, I'd imagine they'd clear the table and make it very pronounced and easy to see. But whatever, there's a number. So I write it down. And it's funny because before I was like just getting into the session, I had a gut feeling of a number, and I said, oh, maybe that's the number, like kind of a remote viewing thing. I was like, but then I had the table number, the one I actually saw. So I actually wrote down 2 numbers, and I wrote next to it, I said 1022. That was the other one. I said, that's a gut feeling. And I'm going to ignore that one because AOL, and I wanted to go with the one that I saw, if I saw any. And I saw that 17. Well, so I saw 173, and I put a 6 at the end. So 1736. So I'm all excited. I've written in my journal, and I go out into our fox's den, and the girl is coming down the stairs with the paper, and it says 1734. Right? And my hairs on my arm.
It's a 1 in 10,000 chance right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the same number, right? The last digit was off. But I knew that I was not sure about the last digit.
Dude.
And even still, like, to get those first 3 digits in the correct positions too, the 1, the 7, the 3.
Yeah.
Is hard. And the trainers were even like, if you know remote viewing or anything where you see
numbers,
numerics, it's really difficult.
Absolutely.
You can see shapes, ideas of things, but actual alphanumerics is really hard to discern. So that was crazy. And then later in the day, I asked the girl, I was like,
do you have a picture of that, by the way?
I don't.
Okay.
She might have.
Okay.
I have to ask her. I should have taken a picture. But I was like, can I see your room? There were some pieces to my vision that I just want to like confirm. And sure enough, she had her bags and clothes all over the floor. On the table, she had a bunch of papers. She's a mother, so she was also pumping. So she had paraphernalia for that. And that was all over the table too. And I was like, I didn't make those out, and I couldn't have told you it was breast pump stuff, but it was clearly other things on the table. And it's funny because she made a note and she said, like, yeah, when I travel, I'm such a mess. And her roommate, had her own desk and it was in the same room.
It was all clean.
Clean as could be. Like my desk was clean as can be. We just got there, you know? But she happened to have all this crap all over the floor and all over the desk. And it's like, that's what I saw.
So that is so freaking wild, dude. First of all, like you projected your conscience. You were there.
Yeah.
And you got these like small glimmers of like, so you were like, you had like part of your consciousness, if not all of it, be in this place.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to know that, like, if she was there and awake, would she have been able to feel or hear or see you or like, it's so interesting to me.
Yeah. She would have told me, I guess, but I didn't ask if she felt me there. But
God, that's so freaking cool, man.
So that got me on a high, and everybody was like, who is this guy? Like he's so good at this already. I was like, dude, I've never done this in my life. Okay. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was like what I needed to see, because I'm very skeptical about this. And maybe that was part of my messaging. Like they'll give me a little, I don't know what they is, but they'll give me a little flavor so that like the rest of the week can just be more about.
You can be open to it.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to be there to like guess numbers and do parlor tricks. I wanted to,
that's my job.
At that point, get deep, with myself. And I think getting that out of the way let me kind of get deeper with myself and experience other things.
Dude, that is so awesome.
Yeah.
That is, when I heard that, I mean, that is just one of those personal confirmations that you definitely need doing this. And the thing is with this is like when you're on this path or whatever it is, like the universe will kind of like give you those signs and throw up these impossible coincidences. Yeah. And my brain, here's a really interesting thing about coincidences that I picked up recently. You might like this, because in mathematical terms, a coincidence is when like 2 angles coincide. When two things coincide.
Okay.
Right? They fit perfectly together. Now, in math, that's on purpose.
Okay.
Because if you have these things with these angles and it coincides with this one,
sure,
it's not random.
Oh, right. If we're talking about the word coincide.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's where it comes from.
Right. Okay.
So we somehow have chosen to add, accidental to this meaning.
Yeah.
When in math, it isn't an accident.
Yeah.
When a coincidence happens, it is calculated on some level through math.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really interesting notion for me to look at coincidences differently now.
Yeah.
Like maybe I just don't have the formula or know the law, but coincidences I think are not coincidences. And it's not something I would have
fit.
Yeah. It's not something I would have thought of
way.
before.
Yeah.
I was very much against that. I was like, well, that's the definition of a coincidence. It's
Love that.
Yeah, but that's really interesting. We had a few sessions as well, like our remote viewing session when Joe McMonagle came over. Everybody got to remote view, and the session was the city of St. Louis had the arch and it had the big stadium.
Yes.
I drew the stadium. I picked up in the stadium.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have it here. I'll show you. And about half the class picked up on the arch.
The arch?
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I'll show you this here in a second.
By the way, I had to. We got the same thing,
You
and
were front loaded?
I couldn't do it because I had seen your story.
Yes.
So I was like, I asked the trainer. I was like, "Is this the same one you did a couple of weeks back?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, I can't do it."
So that's the
Wow.
and
Yeah.
then, that was the
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah,
it's the same
buildings around.
same type thing.
Crazy.
But we had like a few good sessions, and then the one was like the Devil's Peak or whatever.
Okay.
That mountain. We had like it looks like a giant tree trunk. What they used in Close Encounters.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And Marco had picked up on that. He had drawn this like thing with like a bunch of trees around, and he drew a UFO over it. And he's like, I don't know what this means. And then it was the Devil's Peak or whatever it was. And then we're like, yeah, that's where they filmed Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's the UFO connection.
That's so funny.
But one thing we had throughout the week, and you probably had this too, was we would start, and this is apparently very normal for the Monroe Institute.
Okay.
We would start popping up in each other's sessions.
Oh yeah.
So like we would come back. It was so excited from these sessions and be like, hey, you showed up in mine. And they're like, you showed up in mine.
Yeah.
And like, oh, like, and we'd have these exchanges that we were so excited to tell other people, like, or hey, we'd have a secret message, and the people would tell you that. Like we had, it was I think Ignacio and Amy, and they're both kind of veterans to this whole thing. And Ignacio had Amy present her, I think, with what he describes as a bubble gum. But it was a round bubble made of like a soap bubble. But he called it bubble gum for some reason.
Okay.
And she's like, that's funny because I was just playing. She's like, I brought this it's like a toy gun that shoots bubbles. And I go, bubble gun?
Oh, yeah.
And they go, whoa. And she was playing with it just earlier. And like this like weird connection happened. And
I saw her in the meditation early in the day, and so I said those words to her, and I waited to see if she was going to tell me or say the word bubblegum. So when she said that, I said, oh, this has to be this round bubble type thing. So I shared with her, and then she shared with me that at lunch, while I was inside talking, she was out by the pool trying to get her bubble machine to work.
I brought, it was funny because at lunch when you mentioned it to me, you're like, like a soap bubble, like the little bubbles. And I'm like, I was fiddling with it for like an hour. I couldn't get it to work. It has batteries to like it's like a little fun kid's toy where it blows them. And I was going to try and take pictures. And yeah, so I brought a bubble gun.
a bubble gun.
A bubble gun. A bubble gun!
There it is.
I brought a bubble gun.
Oh wow.
Funny.
Yeah, so we'd have all these like overlaying things happen quite a bit. And then as you know, in the story where I saw Jordan's scoreboard.
Yep. The Dallas.
Saw his face, his disembodied head appear like 3D. I was like, oh, it's kind of scary. And then boom, this scoreboard, Dallas 0 and stats. And I was Googling trying to find a picture of this.
And you don't watch sports.
I didn't know.
You don't know shit about sports.
I know sports. I used to play basketball, of course.
Yeah, but
I don't follow sports.
You don't follow sports. That's what I mean.
I didn't know, that Dallas. I didn't know that the playoffs were happening.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Dallas were in the playoffs. I didn't know anything about like you could have told me the playoffs are in 4 months, or they happened yesterday, and I would have believed you. I had no idea. And so when I was like, hey, and he was like in the Fox's den, I came up to him. I was like, hey, does this mean anything to you? And he goes, well, funny that you say that. He's like, first of all, I'm from Dallas. Mavericks are my favorite team. And they're playing tonight. And it's an elimination game. And it's been on my mind. And I usually don't think about it. But today I was like, I have to think. I was like, whoa.
That's weird.
Yeah. So it was like one of those like knowings.
Yeah.
Like when you had that vision, you're just like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's when I saw it, I was like, this is something. Because it was so striking to me. It wasn't a memory.
Yeah.
It wasn't like like sometimes we get these vague 2D sort of like memories, and we're like, oh, it's like an overlay. This was like in like 3D. I was like,
in your
kind of
face.
scary. Yeah.
And something in your video, you said how you were like reluctant to tell him. I felt that too with things like, even though and even with my horse race thing, like even though there's that creeping in of
that human
just, like,
skepticism.
Yeah, that just is like, no, this is stupid. Don't make a fool of yourself, or you're don't go with that. But the one thing that I love that Joe says, and he said it in our session, I'm sure he said it to yours, is that
He said a lot of things.
we talk about this as the sixth sense.
First of all, he didn't remember either of us.
No. he sort of pretended, but
Yeah,
I could
same.
see the glazed over look in his eye.
He meets a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed.
It's all right. No offense. But he said, we talk about this stuff as being like a sixth sense, but it's really your first sense.
Ooh,
I
like
and
that.
he talks about how that's how our species has survived.
Yeah.
Based on that instinctive thing. So, I think society has kind of
Numbed
pushed
it.
that away.
Yeah.
So like even when we have these gut instincts, it's kind of like hard for us to be like, what? Yeah, is this?
And not get ridiculed.
Yeah.
You're right. You're
So
absolutely
we're
right.
kind of, programmed to squash it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. A thing about remote viewing too, and Dr. May said the same thing, was that all of these things are more accurate when there's a life on the line.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. More at stake.
Yeah, because then it also ties into that primitive instinct that we may have developed through survival mechanism. Yeah. To stay alive. Like if something dangerous is going to kill you, you know what I mean, or harm your family, then you might get a vision, an omen.
Yeah.
And
that could save your life.
Exactly, and that's why it was so effective for the CIA, because a lot of times it was hostage situations, or it was high entropy targets like nuclear things,
terrorist, war related.
Exactly, war related, and that's because they and children. Finding children, Joe would always say. He's like, he'd have a very easy time finding kids. Because, again, the life was on the line. And it was like this, I don't know, this vibration or this pulse being sent out as like a help signal, that you're picking up on.
I was going to tell you one more thing about the coinciding storylines or visions that people would have near the end of the week. One session was really profound for me. And then I thought it was going to end. I thought Bob, who was in our ear, was going to kind of wind us down, but there was like more to it. And I was like, oh shoot, what do I do now? I'm like, I did good on this one. Like I have nothing to do. So I was like, I'll try to get out of body. And I did. And I felt like a pop. Like I was walking around the Fox's Den and I was like, I'm going to go and try to get people out of their things. And like, we'll go for a ride, like go hang out. So I was like going room to room, trying to pull bodies out. And along the way, I went up the stairs to the second floor. I was on the bottom floor, and I bump into someone who was floating towards me, and it was this woman, Elizabeth. And I was just like, "What's up?" In my vision or whatever. And I keep going, and then I try to pull some people out. They didn't confirm that, so that didn't work out. But Elizabeth said that she had an experience where she wasn't sure if it was an out of body, but I think it was. She didn't say she saw me. But it was the one time in the whole experience that she felt something where she was out in the hallways.
That was a bit of a confirmation there.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't, I would have liked more confirmation, but it's funny that I saw her only, and that she had the one instance right then, that exact same session,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about the out of bodies that I've had, because I've had 2 since I've gotten back so far. Okay. And maybe by the time this video goes up, I've had more.
Yeah.
One was through a lucid dream after lucid dreaming, or rolling out of a lucid dream. But the second one was from my bed, once again.
Okay.
And I can tell you, like when I hear this, when I hear you saying like you don't know if it wasn't out of body, like there's no other explanation. I see myself. I'm in my room. I'm physically feeling things. And I'm awake, and I can see myself, and it is so scary and terrifying Like, there's no other explanation other than, okay, that's an out of body.
Yeah.
Like, for me. So when I hear you say, like, I don't know, like, I have a hard time imagining what it is you're seeing.
Yeah.
If it's just like a projected consciousness, or if it's not, because I know it is real, because you obviously come back with these numbers and everything else,
Yeah.
but it's just such a varying, the experiences are varied.
Yeah.
And I found that with other people too. Like, where mine is fuzzy, Archie said that his started off being fuzzy, just like mine.
Okay.
Black and white, no color, fuzzy, low ISO, and you could feel it. And you're walking around your house, and you can, like, you know, you can put your hand through a wall. You're like, whoa, like all these things. But as he did it more and more, it become more clear.
Yeah.
And then Rosalie said she would demand clarity. She would go, clarity now.
Oh, okay.
And she's a very docile person, like very shy. But she's like, when I get in my out of body, she's like, I'm very commanding. And she's like, you have to be, because it's your reality. And she's like, clarity now. And all of a sudden it would be clear as day, right? And we would joke about, like, oh, you need OBE plus. You need to sign up for OBE plus to get, like, the HD version.
The 4K.
Exactly, the 4K.
4K streaming.
Yeah, but just to touch on that, because for me it was, there's no, like, I know I was out of body because I could see my body.
Yeah. No, I mean, I did have a short instance where it felt like that, and I wouldn't describe it as having terror, though. But we were in the check units doing our thing, and at one point I had an itch on my nose, and I really try not to move in my sessions, and I usually have my hands, like, interlaced across my chest here. And I went to scratch my nose, and I realized I was, like, into my face. Like,
you were scratching with your consciousness,
with my fake hand,
your
or whatever.
spirit body,
and then it snapped back,
Yo.
right? And there was that, like, realization, the kind of
Yes.
thing, and that felt
like an out of body.
more like what you're talking about. And the itch went away, by the way.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe that was just mentally it went away. And kind of a couple more times that little snapping happened in the same session. Like, I leaned up to reach. It was kind of at the tail end of the session. I was reaching my notebook by my foot, and my hand went through the notebook. And I was like, oh, fuck. It's
out of body.
Yeah, and then I zapped back.
Yeah.
And another instance of that happened. But
okay, so those are more
in line with the kind you're talking about.
Yeah, I think.
But seeing the number, I never felt like I was popped out or floating anywhere or seeing my body. Same with the one where I, like, walked around.
But that's what Archie was telling me about. He's like, there is more than one way to have experiences with your consciousness. And the one thing he kept emphasizing was, you can take a portion of your consciousness and send it anywhere in the universe.
Yeah.
And in time and space, and bring back information. He's like, that is much more valuable. He's like, there is sort of almost like a novelty to the out of body thing, where it's like you want to have it.
Yeah.
But once you've had it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you're kind of like, okay, but now what?
Yeah.
Like, what else can I do? You know, and that's, I'm on my, like, fourth out of body experience that I've had, and I'm still in the phase of, I want to do out of body still, because I'm tiptoeing from having those really crazy flying experiences to the third one I had, which was like, I can't even explain. Like, I'll talk about it here quickly, but I was in a dream. It was turning into a sex dream, and it was during
the true gateway experience.
Well, during that moment that I realized it's this can be a sex dream, I was like, oh, this is a dream. And now I was like, oh, forget that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to go out of body. And as soon as I utter those words in my imagination, I get thrown, is the only description I can have. My consciousness gets thrown. I feel myself being projected like 1,000 miles an hour, and darkness, complete darkness, just being thrown, super scared, hearing a loud whoosh, like a whoosh, like this while it's happening. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, it's happening. I'm out of body. And I remember thinking to myself, because Hannah, who is one of the people that was there, and she was the only person who had an actual out-of-body experience while we were there, and she'd never had one before.
Okay.
And she described, it was really interesting, and she kind of thought to herself, like, oh, maybe this isn't for me. It's happening to everybody else, like that type of deal. And when it happened to her, she got this, like, what she describes a peppermint feeling all over her body, like a cold peppermint feeling. And I had that same feeling. But then she popped out like she describes it like the soul popped out of the mold of her body, like an ice cube out of a tray.
Oh, okay.
Like,
that's a good
pops out.
visual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instantly, she has a sister that lives in Paris, so she's like, Paris, Paris, Paris. you panic when you're out of body. Every time it's happened to me, like since I've been out of body, I'm like, oh, what do I do with this? I don't want to go back to the body. Think of something, right?
Yeah.
And you panic, and
Sure.
everybody's like, slow down, but you have no, like, you're kind of excited.
Yeah.
And she goes, Paris, 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 and whooshes off to Paris. She's flying around Paris. Now she's thinking, I want to get a croissant. And she was way too excited, slammed back in her body, because any emotional spike will bring you back. And wakes up, in tears, like she was so happy. As soon as I left the body and I'm being projected in this eternal darkness, I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? And I go, Paris, Paris, Paris.
Yeah.
When I said it, my voice was like a devil. It was like, Paris, Paris, Paris. I remember thinking, like, what the fuck? Did that come from me? And then I felt the world around me shift. Like, I felt everything shift, even in the darkness. Like, everything was shifting. Like, I was going to Paris. But then I was like, oh, well, I can't see anything. Let me open my eyes. So I start opening my eyes. I'm forcing my eyes open. And now I see these giant monolithic cubes churning, is the only way I can say it, into each other with this giant sound, this rumbling, like Tesseract. Like,
It sounds like Inception when the Paris
Exactly.
actually folds on itself. You remember that scene?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. And I was like, ugh, I was scared of it. And I closed my eyes, opened it again, still there. I was like, God, no. And I was like, wiggle your fingers. And I wiggle my fingers, and I feel myself slam back in my body.
Damn.
So that was that, right? That was a totally different thing. Never happened. Like, it felt closer to a dream than the other things because I couldn't see myself. I couldn't see my room.
Yeah.
But this next one that happened a few weeks ago, or last week, just a couple days ago, actually. I get up. It's like 1:30 in the morning. I'm up in my bed, and I'm thinking, just go back to sleep. I'm like, I'm very tired. Maybe I can have an out-of-body experience. And so I close my eyes. I'm in my bed, and I go, I deeply desire to leave my body. In my head, I deeply desire to leave my body. And on a third time I say it, I felt myself go like glitching back and forth.
Okay.
Like a vibratory glitch. It was very bizarre. At this point, I was buzzing already. My whole body was like vibrating. And I'm sinking into my bed. Now I'm sinking into my bed. I'm like, okay, it's happening. You get that familiar feeling of out of body.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm there. I know I'm in this upside down realm. It's happening.
Yeah.
I force my eyes open. Now I see my room. I'm in the mattress. And I'm like, I got to get up. And I put my hand on the mattress, and I lift myself up, and I look, and I just see myself there just dead. And I go, oh, that's enough for me. All right, that's enough. And I go right back into my body, and I'm wide awake at this point. My heart's pounding. And that's where I'm at with all this.
You got to get over that fear of seeing yourself. I don't know how you do that.
It's and Archie said it takes time. He's like, it's very scary at first, but eventually through practice, like he said, he's like, he would take 2 steps and go back into his body. He would, push
Piece by
forward.
piece, yeah.
Yep. Put his hand through the window. Ooh, that's enough for tonight. Let's go back. And because you do get frightened.
Just
Sometimes
test the waters.
you might see something else you don't like to see. You're like, oh, I don't want to see that. I'm going to go
Yeah.
back in. And have these experiences, and then eventually leave the window and you fly away.
Yeah.
So I'm still in that novelty phase.
That's cool.
But to touch back to where I began this rant was there are so many apparent variations of, things you can do with your consciousness.
It makes sense, right? That if our consciousness is infinite and can do all these different things, like why would the experience of having an OBE always be the same? I'm sure it's some projection of how you approach it and what you're feeling, and it can vary. So that doesn't surprise me,
Yeah, and like Joe McMoneagle says, he always says the subconscious knows all.
Yeah.
Like it's all knowing.
Yep.
And then I'm always reminded that one of my favorite lines from Eddie Vedder, which is a mind full of questions and a teacher in my soul.
Ooh, that's good.
And I've never gotten that before. And it was always one of my favorite songs on the album Into the Wild. The song's called Guaranteed, my favorite song, and the lyrics are amazing. But now it has a whole different meaning where I'm like, I do have a teacher, and the teacher might just be me.
Yeah, right.
One thing I did learn from all this experience is I can go into a room, turn off the lights, put headphones on, listen to sounds, come out of the room with more knowledge than I had going in.
That's so true.
And I'm like, where did that come from? I didn't read a book. I didn't watch a show. I was there by myself, apparently.
Yeah.
And yet I come out knowing more.
Access something.
Yeah, or knowing something better. knowing
Yeah.
more about something.
That's wild. Yeah, I have the same feeling too.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I was gonna say, one thing I was gonna say is talk about the peppermint feeling
Mm-hmm.
that Hannah
Yeah.
had. When these experiences happen to me or something weird happened, I got like a cold air flying in or out. I couldn't really tell the difference, but a cold pressure difference coming out of my ears every time.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I feel it coming. I'll be like, because it's not like there's air being blasted into the
And you're
headphones.
like, that's it.
I was like, okay, something's happening.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I asked the trainers, and they're like, never heard that before. So again, maybe it's just people have different,
I think so.
you
I think we all have different precursors to knowing. I now get that peppermint feeling.
know.
I get it in my stomach and in my back, like it starts growing, and I'm like, "Oh, what's happening?" I try not to get excited, but for me, vibrations is the big one. It starts at my feet, and if I'm having a really good session, it'll like stay around the lower part of my body. But if I'm having like a really intense thing, it'll climb up, and it'll be my whole body. And in the book Journeys Out of the Body, he recommends controlling it to a point where you can run it up your body and down. Kind of like this.
Control
So you're creating this pulse going up and down, and that's like part of the practice of eventually popping out.
Nice.
So I'm getting there.
Cool. Yeah, I mean with the different frequencies of the F10, 15, 21, 12, whatever we were touching on, like I could feel vibrational differences, like, and not necessarily in my body sometimes, but it would be like around my head or like where my consciousness was expanding into, or like my brain felt like it was being like jiggled, you know, like weird sensations with different depths of relaxation or those different frequencies. It was stuff I've never felt in my life. So bizarre.
Yeah, bizarre, but also familiar
Yeah.
is the other thing. There's like
Like I was gonna say loving and comforting, but that's familiar. That's essentially what that is.
Yeah, like getting to know myself. Like I put this into words the other day, but it was like kind of like seeing an old childhood friend for the first time in 30 years.
Yeah.
It was new but familiar.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is me. Like, and yeah, how we've changed.
Yeah.
This is refreshing, familiar, nice. You know, you got that nostalgic feeling of, oh, hey, young Chris, you know, there you are.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of like, you know, in the movie Hook, when Robin Williams goes back and then he realizes that he's Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And that kind of like moment where he's like, oh, and they're like, oh, there you are, Peter. You know, I kind of feel like that now, where I was like, oh, where were you this whole time?
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself like wanting to jump into my check unit. Like I was so excited. Like, let's go. I'm like on a journey.
Right?
And even, you know, I came back Friday and I was exhausted, travel day. And then Saturday, I finally got a moment to do a longer exercise. And I got so excited. And when I was in it, it was like so familiar to be back in that place. And I was like, just so happy to do it again, like to relax and hear some of the sounds. And even Bob's voice like has now become like this very comforting thing to hear.
Yeah. We always joke like we all have daddy issues. Because you're like, you couldn't wait for Bob to tuck in every night and wake you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Definitely daddy issues.
The one thing that was weird to me was when he would say the thing about eliminations, like a lot of eliminations. Do you remember that line?
No.
Like it was usually when you're coming out and he'd be like, you know, you'll remember everything you said, you saw, and you'll be more perfect coming out of this and relax, and all the eliminations will be complete and stuff. I just like.
I never got that.
No,
maybe I drowned that out.
Oh, weird. But I was like, what eliminations are you talking about here?
Sometimes I'd be very much awake, and I would hear his voice come in mid sentence.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, did I just like somehow click out of his voice? Like I would drown him out sometimes, but I was not in a state of sleep.
Same. Yeah, no, sometimes he'd be counting, you know, we go to 12 and it'd be like 10, 11, and then it'd be like 15. I'd be like, oh,
what happened to the other ones?
I was here. I was not asleep because I had like all these visions and stuff.
Yeah.
Wild.
It is funny because when you get into the mind awake, body asleep, so the first thing that goes is your sense of touch.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that goes. And you can feel that when you're meditating, that your hands feel numb and your feet.
Which is like nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Like you kind of feel like, oh, they could be up here.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like that whole feeling. So you're feeling, your touch goes first. Sorry. Then it's your sense of smell. Then it's one or the other, but it's hearing and sight. Or smell, taste, hearing and sight. Sight and hearing go last. So after that, you're asleep. And so the focus 10 is trying to play with that, but not fall asleep.
Right.
And you can tell it's starting to happen when you lose the feeling of your limbs. That's when you're like, okay, that's the first phase. Second phase should be, taste and smell, which you can't really tell. But then you're in this weird in between of sight and sound, where, like we said, you stop hearing things.
Yeah.
You start hearing other things. You stop seeing things, or you start seeing other things, and that's when it becomes nebulous in this weird realm where you start getting visions.
Yeah.
I heard one of the last sessions I had, clear as day. Like I'd hear car doors slamming sometimes, like things like that. But right as I was exiting, I heard woohoo, like this,
Okay.
like it was like Mario Brothers or something. It was like this loud, like audible. I was like, the hell is that?
Yeah.
Did they throw and I asked the trainers after, do you guys
That's
have like a little soundboard? You
Yeah,
had like
yeah.
a woohoo?
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And no. I was like, okay.
And nobody else heard that?
No.
Okay.
It was just, there was this clear like, woohoo, like super
amazing.
happy, ecstatic, like can't explain it. But
funny.
a lot of strange occurrences happen at the Monroe Institute.
Yeah.
And they are no stranger to that over there. They've come across a lot of it.
Yeah. You know what was crazy? Another kind of profound confirmation again was, and this happened throughout, but really when we did focus 15, which is this no time
Yes.
state, they didn't really front load us much before that. And I found what was amazing when we came out, we were all asked to describe where we were, what we felt. Same description. All across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, to varying degrees, but essentially the same. The no time, the void. A black,
Yes.
kind of like nowhereness, infinite possibilities, potential or whatever. And this is common, not just our group.
Yep.
Like they said that this is
We had the same thing.
So for me to think there's different frequencies, the binaural beats were different for this state. And it's like a cocktail of sounds, but ultimately it's this difference in frequency. I was like, how can obviously that's generating a relaxing state that's common for all of us, but like how interesting is it that we're all kind of going to the same place?
Yeah.
Without
it's a real place.
yeah,
No, absolutely.
we're all making the same shit up, you know?
And that, also goes into Focus 21 and 27 and 40 and all the higher levels of like interdimensionality and, these beings and whatnot. Like people say the same thing. They report the same things on these different levels, which is interesting. We on Focus 15, what was interesting, our second session, the entire group clicked out.
Oh, really?
Not one person.
Interesting. Was this the one where you went up to 15, down to 12, up to 15, down to 12?
Exactly.
Okay.
We all clicked out. Every single person.
Weird.
Not one person had anything to report.
That's bizarre.
As soon as I started, like we in the hallways, and I'm like, clicked out on that one. We're like, me too. I was like, oh yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
How'd you do? Clicked out. We're like, oh yeah, us too. Yeah, nice. How about you over there? Clicked out. We're like, dude, did we all click out?
Weird.
We go inside. People sitting down, like, hey, how'd you guys do? Clicked out. I was like, what? I was like, we all clicked out. We're all sitting down. Somebody comes in. You clicked out, didn't you? They're like, yeah. I'm like, whoa. And then 13 of us were like, yeah, we all clicked out.
Wow.
Every one of us. No, nobody had anything to report.
That's got to mean something, right?
I don't know. I thought like we had like theories that like, do we all just get abducted? Like,
as a group, it was scooped you all up.
Did something happen? Did we get like maybe a communal download or something?
Damn.
Yeah. There's some other interesting things that I'd love to get into, but I think we'll save it. We're going to do a little Patreon episode. You down
Sure.
for that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Guys, if you want to be a part of the Area 52 community, it is very simple. You can head over to the Discord for free where we have lots of conversations, but you can also become an intern at Area 52 by signing up to Patreon, $5 a month. Gets you access to all sorts of extra content. We're going to have live Q&As. We have movie nights. We have people help out with our investigations. They actually actively help out in creating these investigations, the people who are part of the Patreon. And you get an extra debriefed episode, which we'll be filming right now. So head over there, and if you don't, just leave a like here, subscribe. Nelson, thanks so much for joining us here.
Awesome being here. Thanks for having me.
Is there anything you want to say to the audience before we go? Is there anything you want to plug?
I would plug going to the Monroe Institute. Holy crap, what an amazing experience. Whether you're spiritual, believe in the paranormal or not, I think it's a way to get to know yourself and answer some deep questions. Again, you don't have to be God. I don't believe in God. I don't know what I believe in anymore, but it's profound, and I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, well said. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.